Hey guys, welcome back. So let's look at another PHP 8 feature that can help you speed up your coding workflow or reduce the amount of code you have in your projects. So it's the thing called property promotion in the constructor. So let's give an example of what the property promotion aims to solve. So if you have a class, for example, like a database class, let's say, now this could be any class. Now, usually these are classes that include arguments in here when you are trying to instantiate this class. So for example, when you have a database class like this, you have to define how, for example, the connection string. Now, usually these values are not inside the class itself because what we want is to avoid editing these classes once we create them. So normally you would have a config file that has the actual variables, and then when you instantiate the class, you want to supply those variables as arguments here so it can make a connection to the database. So in order for that to work, you may need to do something like, say, db is equal to new database, something like that, right? But then you need to supply those variables that I'm talking about, which are these. So I've added an extensive list here of variables just to be sure that you get the point. So let me go this way. So these could be set to actual values, like maybe, let me set one here. So you can have a DB name, or the user is usually root when you're on localhost, and an empty password. Driver could be something like MySQL, and then the path, I don't know about this, maybe the root path, and then the port something like 3306. All right, so you have these variables here that you want to supply into the database class on instantiation. So I can just paste them here like so and supply them when calling this function, as you can see here. Okay, so maybe this is a little bit harder to see. Let me just straighten these guys up a little by, let's do, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to make this into a straight line, sorry. Then let's do delete like that. Wow, that was a long process. Okay, so this is the point I'm trying to make here. When you have all these variables like this, right? Now, once you do this, in the database class, you will have a few functions here. Maybe there's a function to connect, for example, right? And then maybe there's a function to query, right? So query, something like that, okay? Now, all these may need to make a connection every time you call these functions. They'll need to connect to the database. So they'll need those connection strings or values already set as properties so they can access them at any point. So what we normally do is we would put those properties over here like this. Let me just do this again here. So normally these are like private properties. Yeah. Maybe we can set their type as well, like that. Go to the end and put empty strings with a semicolon like that. Okay, that's great. So we have them here. So once the user supplies them, in the constructor here, we have to receive them as well. So let's do that reception. We receive them here, okay, like that. And then in the actual code, we have to set them as well, like that. Because we've received them in the function, but we are not doing anything with them. So here we want to set them. We want to set them to these or save them in these values because these values are empty. We want to use whatever was supplied and set them there. So normally what you would do here is use this keyword and say this, that is equal to, And this was going to be equal to whatever was supplied by the user in the array. So I'm just going to copy, sorry, in the constructor, I'm just going to copy these and put dollar signs like so, semicolon, and that's it. So as you can see, this code, this is boilerplate code, because whenever you are supplying variables like this, you will inevitably have to do this at some point, because here you are receiving the arguments and then you have to set them, but then also you have to set the defaults over here. Okay, so this is fine for small amounts of variables like this, but sometimes this list can get extensive. So PHP 8 introduces a way to skip all these and just leave this part right here. You skip this and this. Okay, so in this case, for example, just to prove that things are working, I have supplied a DB name here into this new database, and then I just want to read to see whether I can actually get that value. So let me change these from private to public so we are able to access them from the outside of the class. And yep, at this point I just want to do DB and grab the DB name, for example, like that. We just want to echo that. So let me do echo. All right, so let's see how that will look in the browser. Where is my browser? Okay, there we go. So if I now refresh, I'm running this on localhost on a particular port. So there we go. It shows us that that value was set inside the database class, which is great. That's what we wanted. Now, PHP 8, of course, introduces a different method. So let me just copy all of this so we can see the difference once I have, actually, maybe not. So what I'm going to do is just remove this. So with property promotion, just by supplying these here, PHP will do the rest of this for you. So let me remove this like so. We don't need that, and we don't need all of these either. Okay, instead what we do is we set the accessors right here. So let's say if it's private or public, we'll set it right here, and the data type if you want, because the data type is optional, and you leave it like that. So that all of that is replaced by this here. So if I save this just to confirm that it actually works, I will refresh here to see no difference at all. So as you can see, it still works, which means it was set as intended. So this is what property promotion is. It completely reduces the amount of code you have to type, which is great. All right, so just a comparison here. If I copy this, let me undo a few times. So you see that whole thing is replaced by this. So clearly there's an advantage here. All right, guys, so hopefully you've learned something from this, and I will see you in another tutorial.